What is the process to sell a house in Ontario with a tenant currently renting it?
Okay, that's a big question,
Sure.
and it happens a lot.
All right, so we're here with Kelly Hawkes. Kelly is with KH Paralegal, obviously a paralegal and an expert in all things LTB. We have a few questions for you today. So we're
Sure.
going to start off with this question here. What is the process to sell a house in Ontario with a tenant currently renting it?
Okay, that's a big question,
Sure.
and it happens a lot. So the first thing you want to do is let your tenant know that that's what you're intending to do. Hopefully you're opening up the conversation to get their cooperation with all the showings. You do have to give 24-hour notice of the showings. If the tenant has consented to receiving notices by email, then you could email them to them. Otherwise, it has to be posted on the door. Obviously, you want to try to do as many showings in a shorter period of time so that you can reduce the amount of interruption in the tenant's life, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. You do have a right to sell the property. You just have to make sure you follow the proper process. Sure. If you have a buyer that is intending to move into the property, then there's a notice that gets served to the tenant to let them know. The tenant doesn't have to move just because they get that notice. Hopefully they'll work with you.
Okay.
But the seller would then have to file an application to the board and go through that process to get vacant possession for the buyer.
Okay.
If you have a buyer that is purchasing the property for investment purposes, then technically that tenant gets to stay. They just have a new landlord. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's lots of things that can happen in between. Sure. Because obviously there's a lot going on where the owner of the property's life has suddenly affected the tenants without their control. So my best advice is to try to maintain an open communication and a positive outlook on discussing it with the tenant and really trying to work with cooperating them, because I think it'll make the process a little smoother for everybody else. Okay,
makes the most sense. And so in the example that the new buyers are going to possess and move into the property themselves, what form would the seller be using?
That's the N12 form.
That's the N12.
Yeah.
And in the event that the new buyers were just planning on keeping it as a rental property and the tenants were going to stay in it, there's no forms to...
There's not a specific form, but you do have to notify them when the property closes and changes hands that they're the new landlord. Here's my address, here's where you're supposed to be directing your rent payments to, and here's how to contact me if there's any problems with the property.
Okay. What would you say is the most common mistake that you see either sellers or buyers kind of make in this situation?
I think because there's a requirement for the buyer to provide a declaration. Okay. Because the law sets out that the person who's moving into the property has to live there as their primary residence for a period of 12 months. I think a lot of times they don't get the declaration from the buyer swearing that that is in fact what they intend to do, and then they are required to do that. The other thing is that the seller also has to provide a declaration that they entered into that agreement of purchase and sale, that the buyer is intending to move in, and they have to pay the tenant 1 month's compensation. Sometimes they forget to do that. Sure. And all of those things could be reasons to dismiss the application after you've waited so long at the board.
Right, okay, so at the end of the day, document as much as you can, as many notices as you can, and that's the best way to kind of
just knowing the notices that are available to you and understanding the process just really clears the runway for a much smoother property sale.
Amazing. Real quick, timing wise, so sometimes there's varying closings on when people go to sell their property. What's the kind of minimum amount of timing that you would need to let current tenants know that this was happening if, say, for example, they were going to be evicted and the new buyers were going to possess the property?
Yeah, so the notice itself that they're going to give to them, that N12 notice, is a 60-day notice. I mean, in most cases, they can't find a place that quickly. Sure. So you definitely want to be cognizant of the fact that it could take a little bit longer to close the property if the tenant is deciding to stay in it and have the board make the decision. Right. So I guess to answer your question, the shortest time period is 60 days. Sure. The longest would probably somewhere around 4 to 5 months.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Happier tenants, happier process altogether, right?
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Kelly, thanks so much.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.